Welcome to Midnight Terrors, where spine-chilling tales come to life. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell for notifications. You don't want to miss a single story that'll keep you up at night. We're on a mission to grow, and your support is everything. Share these terrifying stories with your friends, family, and anyone who dares to listen. Thanks for being part of the journey. Let's begin. Story 1: Warehouse Night. Sarah trudges down a dimly lit street, the ache of a double shift weighing on her. The popular restaurant where she waitresses is loud, chaotic, and filled with fake smiles, unlike the silence of the late-night air. She checks her phone. The bus is late again, and rent is due. She sighs, deciding to walk the rest of the way. As her footsteps echo against the empty pavement, a bus rumbles to a stop beside her. The doors hiss open, but no passengers disembark. Before she can react, two shadowy figures leap out, their movements swift and precise. Rough hands grip her arms, and her muffled screams vanish into the night. A sharp prick at her neck, and her vision swims. The world dissolves into darkness. The warehouse looms ahead, a rotting behemoth under the silver gaze of a full moon. Its jagged windows glint like broken teeth, and rust creeps across its walls like a disease. The wind carries whispers, unnatural, guttural murmurs that scrape against the edges of hearing. A raven perched on a bent fence post lets out an eerie caw and takes flight, its wings slicing through the oppressive gloom. Inside, the air reeks of decay and something far worse. Black candles sputter on the grimy floor, their feeble flames casting grotesque shadows. An intricate glowing pentagram dominates the center of the space, its lines pulsating with a heartbeat of their own. Hooded figures surround it, their low chants weaving into a dissonant melody that vibrates through the bones. At the heart of the pentagram lies Sara, her body unnaturally still. Her arms are spread wide, wrists bound with barbed ropes that bite into her flesh. Her pale face twitches as though caught in a nightmare. Around her are objects of dreadful power, a cracked leather tome that seems to whisper from its pages, a goblet filled with thick black ichor, and a severed goat's head, its lifeless eyes fixed in a grotesque stare. The leader, 50s, draped in crimson-etched robes, steps forward, his jagged dagger glinting with malevolent energy. The blade seems alive, its surface rippling as if thirsty for blood. He raises it above Sarah, his voice cutting through the chants like a blade. By her sacrifice, we shall bind the eternal. Wealth and power will bow before us. As the dagger descends, a sinister voice slithers into the silence. It is not human. It is not earthly. Voice distorted. Fools, you believe you summoned me? It is I who summoned you. The pentagram ignites in a blinding crimson light, throwing the cultists into chaos. A violent shockwave knocks them to the ground, snuffing out the candles and silencing the chants. The dagger freezes mid-air, trembling as though held by an unseen force. Cracks spider through the concrete floor, radiating outward from the pentagram. From the darkness, a guttural growl rumbles, a sound that shakes the walls and curdles the blood. A claw, black as oil and glistening like tar, emerges from the rift. Another follows, pulling up a massive, shifting shadow that refuses to hold a single form. Its grotesque body writhes, limbs dissolving and reforming as it rises to its full, nightmarish height. Its glowing, lidless eyes burn with an otherworldly light. Monstrous voice. You summon me for greed? I answer with ruin. The creature lunges at the cultists, its shadowy tendrils snaking through the air. One robed figure lets out a strangled scream as the darkness engulfs them, leaving only a bloodied heap in its wake. The others scatter, clawing at locked doors as the beast consumes them one by one. Please, help me. The creature halts, its burning eyes locking onto her. For a moment, all is still. Monstrous voice. You are not theirs to claim, but you are mine. Its claw hovers over her chest, and a searing pain shoots through her body. Her vision blurs, her scream swallowed by the roar of the beast. The leader, trembling and desperate, tries to reason with the entity. Leading. Spare me, I can serve you, please. The entity turns, dark tendrils snapping toward him. Monstrous voice. Your soul is the price, and I do not bargain. The leader's screams are cut short as he is dragged into the rift, his body twisted and torn. The remaining cultists fall silent as the warehouse begins to collapse, its walls groaning and splintering under the weight of the creature's wrath. In the chaos, the beast plunges its claw into Sarah's chest. Her back arches, and her world dissolves into blackness. When Sarah awakens, the warehouse is gone, reduced to smoldering rubble. Her bindings are gone, and the marks carved into her skin have vanished. She stumbles to her feet, her body aching, her mind blank. The moon, once full and luminous, is now veiled in crimson clouds that churn unnaturally across the sky. Her phone buzzes in her pocket. Shaking, she pulls it out and sees the screen flicker erratically. The time blinks. 3:33 a.m. A distorted voice whispers through the speaker. It begins. Suddenly, a sharp pain shoots through her chest. Sarah doubles over, gasping, as black veins snake out beneath her skin, pulsating like living tendrils. Her reflection in a shattered window catches her eye. Her pupils have turned into glowing crimson slits, and faint ancient symbols burn along her arms. She stumbles away from the rubble, but her surroundings have shifted. The street is unfamiliar, lined with decrepit, otherworldly buildings. Shadows twist unnaturally, and guttural whispers follow her every move. A figure looms in the distance, watching her, a towering, faceless being cloaked in writhing darkness. Sarah tries to scream, but no sound escapes. Behind her, faint footsteps echo. She turns trembling, only to see herself, an exact double, but with blood-red eyes and a wicked, predatory grin. Doppelganger, welcome home. The last thing Sarah hears is her own laughter, low, guttural, and not her own, before the world around her collapses into blackness. Quick pause, help spread the word. A simple recommendation from you to a friend helps us reach more people and lets us keep creating content you love. Thanks for being part of this journey. Story 2. The Ghost Army of the Cornfield. 3 kids trudged home after a late trip to the mall, their laughter fading as they took the notorious shortcut through a dimly lit alley. It was supposed to save them time. Instead, it led them straight into the hands of shadowy figures. When Amy, 14, stubborn but terrified, Jack, 15, confident but masking his fear, and Ben, 13, the youngest and most timid, woke up, they were bound and groggy, the bitter taste of chloroform still lingering in their mouths. Amy's hidden pocket knife became their saving grace. With trembling hands, she sawed through the coarse ropes binding them and led the group out of the decrepit barn they'd been trapped in. Their escape brought little relief. They were surrounded by an endless expanse of cornfield, the stalks towering high above them, swaying unnaturally in a windless night. The moon barely pierced the thick clouds, casting an eerie pale light. The air carried the faintest trace of decay. A sign hung crookedly from a weathered post at the field's edge, Harrow Farm, SD 1873. Below it, painted in jagged red letters, "Turn back or join them." A low, rhythmic drumming began to echo faintly in the distance. "I don't like this. How did we even get here?" "Jack, we'll figure it out. Let's just stick together." He paused. "This place, I think I've heard stories about it. Something about a ghost army? Thought it was just some dumb legend." Amy's face paled. "It's not just a legend. During the war, soldiers vanished here. No bodies, no graves, just gone." "And now they haunt a cornfield?" Jack sneered, but his unease was obvious. "Ghosts or not, we need to move. This place gives me the creeps." They ventured deeper into the cornfield, the stalks brushing against them like icy fingers. Bones began to appear, small at first, then larger, unmistakably human. Crows perched atop scattered skulls, their dead eyes glinting in the dim light. Feathers, animal carcasses, and strange twisted symbols hung from the corn like macabre decorations. This is a place for sacrifices. Look at all this. Dead animals, symbols." The drumbeat grew louder. Then came another sound. Faint, shuffling footsteps. "Did you hear that?" "No, it's just the wind. Keep moving." But it wasn't the wind. The ground began to tremble beneath their feet, a subtle but growing vibration. The air thickened, growing colder with every step. Then came the whisper, a guttural, bone-chilling murmur that seemed to rise from the corn itself. "Intruders." The trio bolted, crashing through the corn, their breaths ragged. The stalks sliced their skin like blades. The drumbeat became deafening, and the corn seemed alive, swaying violently as though trying to ensnare them. They burst into a clearing, their chests heaving. The air was unnaturally cold here, a frost forming on the edges of the stalks. Shadows twisted unnaturally in the moonlight. Ben, I don't think we're alone. From the corn emerged figures, translucent and skeletal, clad in tattered Civil War uniforms. Their hollow eyes burned with an eerie blue light. Weapons of spectral steel glinted in their hands. One stepped forward. The commander, his shattered iron mask revealing a hollow void where his jaw should have been. The living do not belong here. Amy, trembling but determined, took a step forward. We don't mean to disturb you. Please, we're just trying to leave. The commander tilted his head, his hollow eyes narrowing. A way out? There is no escape. We are bound to this land, cursed by blood spilled long ago, and now, so are you. He raised a ghostly saber. Suddenly, the clearing shifted. They were standing in the midst of a battlefield, a nightmarish landscape of blood and chaos. Soldiers screamed and clashed, cannons roared, and severed limbs littered the ground. This is our truth, eternal, inescapable. The vision snapped back, leaving Amy on her knees, sobbing. Amy, please, we didn't ask for this. The commander loomed over her, his eyes burning brighter. Sorry does not undo war. You will join us. The ghost army advanced. Ben screamed as Jack hurled a rock, but it passed harmlessly through the commander. Jack! Amy, do something! Amy fumbled with a medallion around her neck, a gift from her grandfather. It began to glow faintly, and the commander froze, his empty gaze fixed on it. Where did you get that? It was my grandfather's. He told me it was special. The commander's tone shifted, his voice laced with a hint of desperation. That medallion belonged to the general who cursed us. It has the power to set us free. Amy remembered the strange symbols her grandfather had shown her. With trembling hands, she began drawing them in the dirt. Get in the circle, now! Jack and Ben dove inside as the ghost army lunged. The soldiers slammed against an invisible barrier, their forms distorting. Only the commander stepped through. Blood calls to blood. You cannot banish us. Amy's voice grew louder, more desperate, as she recited her grandfather's incantation. By the light of the living, I sever the chains of the past. By the will of the present, I release the horrors of the dead. The circle blazed with blinding light. The ghost soldiers dropped to their knees, their forms dissolving into mist. Even the commander faltered, his skeletal features melting away. As he faded, he spoke one last time. You have freed us. Take this as a token of our gratitude. A glowing stone materialized in Amy's hand as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon. The cornfield stood still and silent once more. Shaken but alive, the trio stumbled to the nearest police station, the glowing stone tucked safely in Amy's pocket. Do you think they're really gone? Amy didn't answer. She just clutched the stone tighter. Quick break. Know someone who might love this content? Send them a link. Every share helps us expand our reach, and we truly appreciate every bit of support from viewers like you. Story 3: The Devil's Deal. In a small Mexican town, Dia de los Muertos was a time of remembrance, joy, and connection with the dead. For Maria Delgado, it became a day of unimaginable pain. Her 16-year-old son, Mateo, had vanished weeks earlier, only to be found in a shallow grave, his body riddled with brutal marks. It was no secret who was behind it. Los Sombras, the ruthless local cartel, had abducted him as revenge for a debt his father had failed to pay. On the Day of the Dead, Maria, grief-stricken and consumed by rage, wandered to the town's cemetery at midnight. Clutching Mateo's favorite toy, she sobbed at his grave, her cries echoing through the night. Desperation made her reckless, and she whispered a plea into the darkness. Dios, if you will not help me, then I will call upon your enemy. The temperature plummeted, and a foul wind blew out the candles. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall, with glowing red eyes and an aura of malevolence. The devil himself stood before her. You summoned me, Maria, he hissed, his voice like cracking embers. What do you seek? Maria's voice trembled but did not falter. Avenge my son, make them suffer as he did. The devil smiled. And what will you give in return? Without hesitation, Maria replied, my soul, take it when my task is done. The devil laughed, a sound that shook the earth, and extended a clawed hand. Maria grasped it. A fiery mark burned onto her palm as their pact was sealed. Go home, Maria. They will face their reckoning before dawn. That same night, in a decrepit mansion on the edge of town, Los Sombras celebrated their latest haul of stolen goods. 6 of them sat around a table laden with alcohol, drugs, and cash, oblivious to the storm that had begun brewing outside. At precisely 1 a.m., the lights flickered and died. The room plunged into darkness. "What the hell?" snarled their leader, El Diablo, a man whose cruelty had earned him his nickname. The generator roared back to life and the lights returned, but something was wrong. The room felt colder, and the air reeked of sulfur. One of the gang members, Jorge, froze, his face pale. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. "Hear what?" snapped El Diablo. A faint, chilling sound drifted through the air, a boy's laughter. Suddenly, the front door slammed open, and the candles on the table burst into blue flames. Standing in the doorway was the silhouette of a young boy, his features obscured but his glowing eyes unmistakable. "Mateo?" Jorge stammered. The figure stepped forward, dragging a rusty chain behind him. His face became clear, bloody, pale, and disfigured from the torture he'd endured. "You took my life," Mateo whispered, his voice distorted and echoing. "Now I'll take yours." The room erupted into chaos. Jorge screamed as the chain flew through the air, wrapping around his neck and dragging him into the shadows. His screams were cut short by the sickening sound of bones snapping. "Holy shit!" another gang member shouted, drawing his gun. He fired wildly, but the bullets passed through Mateo as if he were made of smoke. The gang scattered, each fleeing into a different part of the mansion. In the kitchen, Pablo hid behind the counter, clutching a knife. His breaths came in gasps as he tried to calm himself. The lights flickered, and when they stabilized, Mateo was crouched on the counter above him, his lifeless eyes staring down. Pablo's scream was cut short as Mateo plunged the knife into his chest, again and again. In the hallway, Carlos sprinted for the exit, but the door wouldn't budge. Behind him, a whisper. "You can't escape." Carlos turned to see Mateo standing inches away. He felt a searing pain as invisible hands lifted him into the air and slammed him against the wall. His body twisted unnaturally, his screams echoing through the house before his neck snapped. By dawn, only El Diablo remained. Bloodied and terrified, he barricaded himself in the attic, clutching a crucifix. The silence was deafening. "I'm sorry," he screamed. "I didn't mean to kill the kid. Please, spare me." The air grew cold, and the crucifix melted in his hands. Mateo appeared before him, joined by shadowy figures, other victims of the cartel. "Your time is up," Mateo said. The shadows descended on El Diablo, tearing him apart piece by piece. His screams echoed across the countryside, fading only when the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon. When the townspeople arrived at the mansion later that morning, they found the gang's mutilated bodies and walls scrawled with blood. "Justicia para Mateo." Maria stood outside, watching as the devil appeared once more. "Your wish has been granted," he said. "Your soul is mine." Maria nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Take me. I have nothing left to live for." The devil grinned and extended his hand, but before he could claim her, Mateo's spirit appeared. "No," Mateo said firmly. "You cannot take her. She acted out of love." The devil snarled but relented. "Very well. But the mark remains. One day, Maria, I will return." And with that, he vanished, leaving Maria alone in the rising sun, the cries of her son's spirit fading into the wind. Hold on tight, because you're about to enter a world of pure terror. Hit that subscribe button now, and ring the bell if you dare. You wouldn't want to miss these spine-chilling updates. Think you're brave enough? Then go ahead, choose the video on my right, or maybe the one on my left. But beware, these aren't just stories. They're nightmares that will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Not everyone makes it through, so viewer discretion advised. Only the fearless will survive the terror waiting within.